A ceasefire, a beacon of hope. In the midst of chaos and destruction, it stands as a symbol of humanity's enduring desire for peace. The world watches with bated breath, hoping that this time the promise of tranquility will hold. A promise of respite from the relentless grip of war. For families torn apart by conflict, it is a chance to reunite, to rebuild shattered lives. The ceasefire is more than just an agreement. It is a lifeline for those who have known nothing but fear and loss. It offered a glimmer of possibility, a chance for peace to take root. In the eyes of children there is a spark of hope, a belief that tomorrow might be better than today. The playgrounds, though damaged, echo with the sounds of laughter once more. After weeks of bloodshed and terror, the warring factions agreed to a cessation of hostilities. The terms were clear. Leaders from both sides, weary from the toll of conflict, sat down to negotiate, understanding that the future of their people depended on their ability to compromise. The guns would fall silent. Soldiers who had once seen each other as enemies, now faced the daunting task of laying down their arms. The battlefield, once a place of death and destruction, began to grow quiet, the silence almost deafening in its contrast. The bombs would stop raining down. Cities that had been under siege could finally breathe. The night sky no longer lit by the flash of explosions but by the hopeful glow of fireworks, celebrating the ceasefire. A fragile truce, desperately needed, hung in the balance. The white flag, though frayed and worn, symbolized a tentative peace. Soldiers on both sides eyed each other warily, knowing that trust would take time to build. But peace, in this tormented corner of the world, is a fickle mistress. The scars of war run deep, and the path to reconciliation is fraught with challenges. Yet, amidst the ruins, life finds a way. A single flower blooms, a testament to resilience. It is a fleeting whisper in the deafening roar of conflict. The voices of those who yearn for peace are often drowned out by the clamor of war. Yet they persist, hoping that their whispers will one day become a chorus. The ceasefire, meant to be a bridge to a more hopeful future, proved to be a fragile thread, easily broken by the weight of history and mistrust. The bridge, though shaky, offers a path forward, if only both sides can muster the courage to cross it. The ink on the agreement was barely dry before the sound of explosions once again shattered the uneasy calm. The cycle of violence, it seems, is not so easily broken. Yet even in the face of setbacks, the hope for peace endures, a flickering flame in the darkness. The world watched in horror as the ceasefire crumbled. The promise of peace, so recently within reach, evaporated into the smoke-filled sky. Israeli warplanes, symbols of destruction and despair, once again roared over the densely populated Gaza Strip. Missiles rained down, targeting buildings that had somehow withstood the previous assaults. The roar of the explosions was deafening, shaking the very foundations of the beleaguered city. Buildings that had once been homes, schools and hospitals were reduced to rubble in an instant. The streets, once bustling with life, were transformed into treacherous landscapes of debris and dust. The ceasefire, meant to protect innocent lives, had become a cruel joke. The human cost of this renewed violence is staggering. The lifeless bodies of men, women, and children, their futures extinguished, lay buried beneath the rubble. Hospitals, already overwhelmed by the casualties of the previous attacks, struggled to cope with the influx of wounded. The cries of the injured mingled with the wails of grief-stricken families. The lucky ones, if you can call them that, escaped with their lives, but their homes, their livelihoods, their sense of security were gone. The stench of death and destruction hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder of the fragility of life in a war zone. The violence was not confined to Gaza. In southern Lebanon, a region scarred by decades of conflict, the echoes of war resonated once more. Israeli forces, citing the presence of Hezbollah, launched airstrikes and artillery bombardments, targeting towns and villages along the border. The fragile peace that had held since the 2006 war was shattered. Homes were destroyed, families were torn apart, and the specter of a wider conflict loomed large. The ceasefire violations in southern Lebanon served as a stark reminder that the flames of conflict, once ignited, can easily spread, engulfing entire regions in their destructive embrace. Section 5. A Legacy of Violence, the Ongoing Conflicts. The Middle East has long been a region of turmoil, where the echoes of past conflicts reverberate through the present. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, in particular, stands as a poignant symbol of this enduring strife. The recent violence in Gaza and southern Lebanon is not an isolated incident. It is a stark reminder of the fragile peace that hangs by a thread in this volatile region. Each explosion, each act of aggression, is a painful reminder of the unresolved issues that continue to fuel the fire. It is but the latest chapter in a long and bloody conflict, a cycle of violence that has plagued the region for generations. From the wars of the mid-20th century to the intifadas and beyond, the history of this land is marred by bloodshed and loss. The scars of past battles are etched into the very fabric of the region. The roots of this conflict run deep, fueled by historical grievances, political deadlocks, and a profound lack of trust. Decades of failed negotiations and broken promises have only served to entrench the divisions. Political leaders, both local and international, have struggled to find common ground, their efforts often thwarted by deep-seated animosities and competing interests. Each new outbreak of violence only serves to deepen the divides, making the prospect of a lasting peace seem ever more distant. The human cost is staggering, with countless lives lost and communities torn apart. The images of destroyed buildings and grieving families are a stark testament to the ongoing suffering. The international community, often divided and seemingly powerless, struggles to find a way to break the cycle of violence. Despite numerous peace talks and negotiations, a comprehensive solution remains elusive. The United Nations and other global bodies continue to call for restraint and dialogue, but their efforts are frequently met with skepticism and resistance. The question remains, how many more lives must be lost before peace is given a chance? The dawn over a war-torn cityscape brings with it a glimmer of hope, yet the memorials and vigils for victims serve as a somber reminder of the cost of conflict. The path to peace is fraught with challenges, but it is a journey that must be undertaken for the sake of future generations. Section 6. Maintaining the peace, a daunting challenge. Maintaining a ceasefire, especially in a region as volatile as the Middle East, is a daunting task. It requires commitment, compromise, and a willingness to address the underlying issues that fuel the conflict. It demands leadership, not from those who seek to exploit the conflict for their own gain, but from those who genuinely desire a just and lasting peace. The challenges are immense. Mistrust runs deep. Extremists on both sides remain committed to violence. The weight of history, with its legacy of broken promises and unhealed wounds, hangs heavy over any attempt at reconciliation. Section 7. The urgency of dialogue. Seeking a path forward. Despite the challenges, the pursuit of peace must continue. The alternative endless cycles of violence, suffering, and despair is simply unacceptable. The only way forward is through dialogue, however difficult or unlikely it may seem. Both sides must come to the table willing to listen to each other's grievances, to acknowledge each other's pain, and to seek common ground. There can be no military solution to this conflict. The only path to a lasting peace lies in a negotiated settlement that addresses the legitimate aspirations of both Israelis and Palestinians. Section 8. The World Watches, International Response and Responsibility. The international community has a moral obligation to do everything in its power to help bring an end to the violence and create the conditions for a just and lasting peace. This is not a time for empty rhetoric or symbolic gestures. The world is watching, and the world expects action. Concrete steps must be taken to hold those responsible for human rights violations accountable, to provide humanitarian assistance to those in need, and to support efforts to rebuild shattered lives and communities. Section 9. A Call for Peace, Ending the Cycle of Violence. The recent violence in Gaza and southern Lebanon is a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict. The images of destroyed homes and displaced families are not just scenes from a distant land. They are a call to our shared humanity. Each life lost, each family torn apart, is a tragedy that reverberates across the globe. We cannot afford to turn a blind eye to the suffering of our fellow human beings. It is a call to action for all who believe in peace, justice, and human dignity. We must come together, regardless of our backgrounds, to advocate for a world where conflicts are resolved through dialogue and mutual understanding. The power of collective action cannot be underestimated. When communities unite with a common purpose, they can move mountains and bring about lasting change. The time for complacency is over. We can no longer sit idly by, hoping that someone else will solve these problems. The urgency of the situation demands our immediate attention and action. Every moment we delay is another moment of suffering for those caught in the crossfire of violence. We must act now with determination and resolve to create a better future. The time for action is now. We must raise our voices, organize our communities, and push for policies that prioritize peace and reconciliation. Activism is not just about protests and rallies. It's about building a sustained movement that can influence change at every level of society. From local initiatives to global campaigns, every effort counts in the fight for peace. We must demand that our leaders choose the path of peace over the path of war. It is our responsibility to hold them accountable and ensure that they represent our collective desire for a peaceful world. Political leaders have the power to make decisions that can either escalate or de-escalate conflicts. Our voices must be loud and clear. We want peace, not war. We must support organizations working to build bridges of understanding and reconciliation. These organizations play a crucial role in healing the wounds of conflict and fostering a culture of peace. By volunteering our time, donating resources, or simply spreading their message, we can contribute to their vital work. Every small act of support can make a significant difference, and we must never, ever give up hope for a future where violence is not the answer. Hope is the driving force that keeps us moving forward, even in the darkest of times. It is the belief that a better world is possible, and that our efforts can bring about meaningful change. We owe it to future generations to keep that hope alive, where dialogue and diplomacy prevail, and where conflicts are resolved through understanding and negotiation rather than violence. Diplomacy is not just the work of politicians and diplomats, it is a skill that we can all practice in our daily lives. By listening to each other and seeking common ground, we can build a foundation for lasting peace. And where peace is not a fragile dream but a living reality, a world where people of all backgrounds can live together in harmony, celebrating their differences and finding strength in their diversity. This is the vision we must strive for, and it is within our power to make it a reality. Together, we can end the cycle of violence and build a future of peace.